Morning, I'm live. Good morning, everyone. So, my name is June Allen, and I am the founder of the Art of Greatness at juneallen.net. So, today I'm going to be talking about five adult personality types that manifest as a result of abandonment as a child. Okay, so I hope you're all doing well on this slightly chilly September morning. Yeah, I can't believe it's September already. We've only got a few months left of the year. But anyway, I hope that you've had a good summer, and you're ready to kind of dive into this month. So, for those of you that don't know me, that don't know anything about what I do, I am a mum, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm also a student psychotherapist. I've got 1 year left. Yay! 1 year left before I qualify. So yeah, and I've been doing this work. I've been running this platform since 2006. Been on my own journey since 2009. And I came into doing this work via my own process. Back in 2009, I went into 12-step recovery off the back of a really painful, dysfunctional relationship. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. And yeah, I learned a lot about myself, learned a lot in therapy. But what was missing for me in that process was there was no cultural context. I didn't understand what it meant to be a black woman. I didn't understand what it meant being a black woman doing this work. Hi, Gloria. Thanks for joining. She's saying hi. I missed your lives. Yeah, I haven't been here for the last couple of weeks. I just needed to, with the summer and everything, I just needed some time to reflect, and I've been planning and doing all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to be back once a week now. So yeah, it's good to have you here. So thanks for joining me live. So yeah, I learned a lot on everything about. Hi V, thanks for joining. Yeah, so I learned a lot about that process, but there was no cultural context, so I didn't understand what it meant to be a black woman doing this work. So I decided that I just basically became obsessed with reading and doing loads of other stuff, just so I could find out, the link between racism and my healing process, because we still live under the system of racism, and I needed to know how to cope with it. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't understand how to deal with the racial stress. I just didn't understand it. I didn't know, and no one was really talking about it at the time within the context of self-care and well-being. I mean, there was a lot of people talking about racism within the context of, defining it and all of that kind of stuff, but I didn't really, at the time, I didn't really see anyone or hear anyone talking about it within the context of self-care. And so that's kind of why I started, because I know that I needed it. And then the more I sort of started talking about it, and it started really impacting how I was healing. I started feeling more confident. I started feeling more empowered to do stuff, and I started sharing it with other people. And the more I shared it with other people, people just started asking me more for advice, for support, all that good stuff. And yeah, and that's basically how this platform got started, and why I decided to become a therapist as well. Why I started training as a therapist, because I began to see that there were gaps also in the therapeutic process as well around the cultural context. And so I really, really wanted to be part of that process. So I decided to become a therapist, and I've been sharing my journey, as you all know, over the years. And yeah, that's how the platform was born, and how I came to, how the Art of Greatness started. So for those of you that don't know anything about my journey, that's kind of a little bit about me. So if you want to find out more about what I do and how you can work with me, you can click the link in the bio, go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. So today's session, I'm going to be talking about 5 adult personality types that happen as a result of childhood abandonment, which is huge. And that's come off the back of this book. Okay, we're doing this in the mastermind that I run, a mastermind for black women as well, which is so awesome. And on Thursday evenings we have a book club. Hi everyone. Hi, thanks for joining. Hi Davis, nice to see you. So we run a book club, and we are currently reading this book at the moment. It's called What Mama Couldn't Tell Us About Love. So we read one chapter a week, We read it live in the session, so don't worry if you haven't got the book or if you've missed previous chapters. We read the chapter, but we focus on the topics that are in the chapter. So this week it's all about this is kind of why I wanted to do this live stream today, actually, because it's inspired by this week's topic. It's called Open Your Heart to Your Man, but there's a section in there that talks about the different personality types, and I've kind of put my own spin on it, so I wanted to share that with you. All right, so if you're interested in joining the book club, the mastermind, then obviously click the link in the bio, heal.juneallen.net, and you can find out more about that. The first reason for the first personality type is the strong black woman. Miss Strong Black Woman. Are you Miss Strong Black Woman? So Miss Strong Black Woman is the woman that just soldiers on, cracks on with whatever she's doing, finds it difficult to feel things, finds it difficult to ask for help. In the book they call her Miss Responsibility. All right, but I call her Miss Strong Black Woman. And we know as black women, that's how we're portrayed. And it's like, if we show any type of vulnerability, it's almost like a dirty word for us to be vulnerable, for us to have feelings. But, when we've been abandoned as children, or if our parents don't meet our needs for whatever reason, it can become very difficult for us to, number one, understand what our needs are, and number two, to ask for help. So our survival response is to just, go into this responsibility, strong black woman, I don't need anyone type of conversation. And it just becomes difficult for us to be able to connect to people on that level. So we end up just being responsible for everybody. We tend to be people that come to ask for help. I'd probably say this is probably my one more than anything. This is the one that I had to deal with more. Well, actually, there's probably a bit of all of them in me, to be honest. But this one's probably the biggest one for me that I've really had to work through over the years. And as black women in general, I know that this conversation around being a strong black woman is something that a lot of us deal with, a lot of us struggle with. And I think once you begin to understand that this is a survival response from, a history or a childhood upbringing where maybe you didn't have both your parents around, maybe your parents were there physically, but they weren't there emotionally. Okay, so you basically had to deal with a lot of stuff yourself. So understanding that that's the reason why you are stuck in this strong black woman thing is also like a really good catalyst for you to be able to understand, oh, well, maybe the reason I'm like that is because of my childhood stuff that happened. And maybe if I'm in a space, if I'm in an environment where I can unpack the childhood stuff, it might help me come to a place where actually I don't have to do this all by myself. And that actually recognizing that conversation around I can do it all by myself is really about fear of allowing other people to come into my life. It's really about fear of not allowing, or fear of being let down, fear of being rejected and abandoned again. So once you understand, if this is you, if you relate to that personality type, then it really makes sense for you to really pause and think about the impact of what it means for you to be constantly in this place of feeling like a strong black woman. If you do join the book club and you join us for the session tonight, one of the things that that we will be talking about is what you can do about the personality type. There's also a huge library in the mastermind as well, with loads of resources, journal prompts, all of that kind of stuff, which we'll be using some of them in this session tonight, where people can begin to understand, what they can do about it, what is their actual personality type and what they can do about it. All right. So that's number one. That's Miss Strong Black Woman. Okay. Number one. Number two, the second personality type, okay, for people that have had to deal with childhood abandonment is Miss People Pleaser. Okay, Miss People Pleaser. Are you a people pleaser? Do you find it difficult to say no to other people? And again, the root of all of that, the root of that behavior is fear of abandonment. If you speak up and say what you think, if you speak up and say how you feel, if you speak up and say, I've got these needs or whatever, is the other person going to say to me no? Is the other person going to just ignore me? Is the other person going to shame me for having needs? And these are all things as black women living under the system of racism, that we've been trained not to have any needs. If you grew up in a home that was violent or that was abusive, again, it's a survival thing. We've told ourselves that, well, in order for me to stay in any type of relationship as an adult, as a child, you learnt that behavior because your parents were not available to you as a child. So we've learned that kind of, well, you know, I've got to keep the status quo. I just need to keep things peaceful. I just need to, I just need to be invisible. In order for me to stay in any type of relationship, I need to be invisible. I need to be needless. I need to be wantless in order for me to stay in a relationship. So you learn to focus on the other person and abandon yourself. Okay. Is that you? Is that you? Is that how you behave in relationships? Okay. And that's not to judge you or to make you feel bad about that, because it's about understanding that it's a survival behavior that you learn in childhood. Okay. And it's also something that you've learned so that you wouldn't have to deal with what it feels like to be abandoned. Once you start to feel confident and you start to have a better relationship with yourself, what other people think about you know, it doesn't bother you as much. It doesn't bother you because you're so grounded in who you are. You're so much more grounded in your own sense of self and your identity that you don't need other people's opinions in order to have a sense of self-worth. Okay? You don't need to people please other people because you know that you can take care of yourself. And other people's opinions, you can listen to them. Thanks for your opinion, but actually that doesn't faze me, because at the end of the day, you know who you are. You know who you are. And as a recovering people pleaser myself, it still sometimes feels difficult to say no to people, but I understand that the discomfort that comes with saying no to other people, that's just, old behavior. That's just my old patterns, my old inner critic coming to remind me that, that person might not like you if you say no or whatever. But I've learned to understand and observe the inner voice, but I don't pay attention to it, in the sense that it's not in the driver's seat. Okay, my people pleaser is not in the driver's seat. My people pleaser is in the back seat where it belongs. So I understand that it's there. I know where it comes from, but it doesn't run my life. And it certainly doesn't run my relationships. Okay, so if that's you, okay, and you would like some support, or you'd like to know how to deal with people that are how to deal with being a people pleaser, how to stop being a people pleaser, how to deal with the feelings and stuff that come with the discomfort of saying no and all of that kind of stuff, join us for the book club tonight. Okay, click the link in the bio, go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. Okay, so that's number 2, Miss People Pleaser. Are you a people pleaser? All right. Number 3, Miss Sabotage. Okay. Are you Miss Sabotage? Now, what I mean by Miss Sabotage is, are you the type of person that is just going to, you're going to reject people before they reject you? Okay, it means you reject people before they reject you, because you're so afraid of abandonment. You're so afraid that the other person's going to reject you or judge you. So you actually leave the relationship, or you sabotage the relationship before that person gets the opportunity to hurt you. It's all about fear at the end of the day. All of these different personality types are rooted in fear of abandonment. So you leave the relationship, you sabotage it, or whatever it is. You focus on making the other person wrong, and so you've got an opportunity to leave. This is this is part of my story. I mean, as I said before, there's parts of all of these personality traits that I can relate to at different parts of my life, different parts of my story. And I know that I would pick men. Okay, I would pick men that were broken. Okay, I would pick men that are broken. So then I had the opportunity then to blame them about the relationship being rubbish, and then I had an opportunity to leave. I could leave those relationships, and then I get to be right that all men are rubbish, that they don't show up, that they can't, that you're not worthy, that I'm not worthy of love, and all of that. I get to be right about all of those things because ultimately I picked somebody, and that is a form of self-sabotage. That's a form of self-sabotage. I didn't realize at the time, at the time I was picking them unconsciously. This is before I started going into therapy and doing all that kind of stuff. I was picking all of these people unconsciously that were not able to show up for me, because underneath all of that, again, was unresolved abandonment wounds. Okay, unresolved abandonment wounds from my parents. It doesn't mean to say that my parents were there physically, but emotionally, I didn't have a strong connection to my parents. I didn't have a strong attachment to my parents at an emotional level. So there's still the emotional abandonment. So don't just think that just because your parents were there that you weren't abandoned. There's such thing as emotional abandonment. Okay, and that's still, you still need to process that. You still need to process that. It's important for you to understand that and to do that work so that you can stop. So I had to do that work in order to stop picking people that were not available. I had to stop picking people that were going to abandon me. So I had to do that work for myself. I had to deal with or unpack all of the impact of what happened as a result of my parents not being emotionally available. And this is very common in the Black community, actually, because all of the stuff that's happened to us. I mean, my parents are from Jamaica, okay? And my parents are from Jamaica, so there's 240 years of chattel slavery. Okay, 240 years of chattel slavery, and none of my ancestors went to therapy when they left the plantations. So that stuff gets passed down. Okay, that stuff gets passed down around not being emotionally available, because pain doesn't just vanish. Pain doesn't just vanish. And quite often, if you're in a lot of pain, if you were raised in an abusive environment, or you've been in, whatever happened when you were a child, if it was painful, or your parents have got unresolved pain, that stuff doesn't just vanish. It doesn't just disappear. Okay, and so what happens is, quite often, if you're in a lot of pain, you're not going to be able to be present in your relationships, because that pain is always going to be dominant. That pain is always going to be acting out in some sort of way, some sort of shape or form. Okay, so doing the work means you having to unpack and deal with that pain, so that you can make space for somebody who is emotionally available to come into your space. That's how it works. Okay, that's how it works. Not talking about it, or blaming the other person, or sabotaging, or people pleasing. All of these things are not going to make your relationship work. They're not going to make your relationships work, because at the end of the day, the root of it is you've got abandonment issues that haven't been dealt with, and therefore, you're gonna struggle with being in relationships where people are available. Okay, being in relationships that where people are available, and you're going to keep sabotaging. You're going to in the book, she calls them, in this book that we're reading, she calls the Miss Sabotage, Miss Love 'em and Leave 'em. Miss Love 'em and Leave 'em. Okay, because you're afraid of the intimacy, you're afraid of the connection, you're afraid of you're afraid of the relationship. And quite often, particularly if you've been if you had a childhood experience where there was violence, intimacy then feels threatening. Intimacy then becomes threatening, because your experience of being close to somebody is triggered by historical memories of being attached to somebody that was also violent. You're attached to somebody who was unsafe. Okay, so intimacy then becomes unsafe. Intimacy then becomes threatening. And so you find it difficult to be in love relationships with your partner, because underneath all of that is your abandonment stuff from your parent who abandoned you emotionally but was also violent. I hope that makes sense. And, this might help to understand why you behave a certain way in relationships. And again, we'll be unpacking some of those conversations tonight in the book club. So if you relate to Miss Sabotage, okay, and you want to join us for the book club, click the link in the bio, go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. Okay, so that's number 3, Miss Sabotage. Number 4, okay, is Miss Catastrophe. Okay, number 4 is Miss Catastrophe. So that means that anytime you go into a relationship, okay, and that relationship can be love relationship or friendship or whatever it is, you're catastrophizing about it. Everything about the relationship is wrong. Again, underneath all of that is fear of abandonment. Okay, you notice everything in the relationship that's wrong, everything in the other person that's wrong, and you find it difficult to be able to stand in what's going right. If stuff does go right, You're constantly thinking, oh my God, it's going to go wrong in a minute. It's going to go wrong in a minute. This person's going to leave me in a minute. It's going to go, I never have nice things. They never last that long. At some point, this person's going to abandon me or leave me or be abusive or what, you're constantly catastrophizing about what could happen in the relationship rather than being present and enjoying the relationship with that person. You're constantly catastrophizing about what could go wrong. And like I said before with the other ones, underneath all of that is fear of abandonment, and that comes from your childhood place. Okay, underneath all of that is fear of abandonment. All right, are you Miss Catastrophe? Okay, does that make sense to you? Are you Miss Catastrophe? Do you find yourself in relationships and friendships where you're constantly worrying about what the other person's doing? And again, that can also trigger the people pleaser in you as well. If you're worrying about things, it can trigger the people pleaser in you. It can trigger the sabotage in you, or it can trigger that I don't really need you. So I'm just gonna, the strong black woman, which was number one. Okay, these are all really important things because they kind of weave into each other. They kind of weave into each other. And again, this is one of the things that I've done, in relationships as well. Just catastrophizing and just thinking that, oh my God, if I do meet someone nice, it's only a matter of time before something wrong's gonna happen. And the healing process is really understanding that relationships aren't perfect. There's two human beings trying to do their best, and if the person does decide that this is not what they want, then you will be okay. I will be okay. Okay, that's the important part of the healing process. Understanding that, number one, you can't control other people, and number two, if the other person does decide to leave or sabotage the relationship or whatever, that you will be okay because you're so grounded in your own confidence and your self-esteem that you don't need the other person to validate you in that respect. Okay, and the adult part of you understands that you'll deal with whatever comes up in the relationship. You can handle it because you've got tools. That's how I feel now when I'm in relationships, whether it's friendships or love relationships or whatever. I know that I can handle what happens in those relationships because I've got tools and because I have a strong sense of identity and confidence in who I am as a black woman. So I don't need the other person. That doesn't mean I don't care about them, but it just means that I know who I am and I'm not going to put up with any rubbish. I'm not going to put up with any rubbish. I don't need to accept crumbs. Okay, this is another thing that's linked to the kind of miscatastrophe and also the people pleaser as well. You end up accepting crumbs from people because you just think, oh well, I don't want the other person to leave or whatever, so I'm just going to accept the bare minimum. I'm just going to accept the bare minimum because that's all I deserve. And again, it comes from that place of abandonment when you were a child, and maybe you accepted crumbs as a child. Maybe your parents only gave you crumbs. They gave you the physical stuff. You had shoes, you had clothes, you had food, you had a roof over your head, but that's it. There was no emotional connection. There was no emotional engagement. There was no affection. There was no hugs, all of that kind of stuff. And a lot of times we're shamed as well. We're shamed for wanting to have our emotional needs met. We've been trained as children. We've been trained as black people, as black women, to not have any emotional needs. And then if we say, if we express these needs to people, then we're shamed for it. And so when we ask, what are your needs, we don't know. This is something that comes up all the time in the mastermind with the ladies that I work with, because they've been so trained not to have any needs or wants in their relationships, and it comes from childhood, that when I ask them, what do you need? They don't know. They don't know what they need. And so, an important part of the process is understanding what your needs are, understanding what your emotional needs are. And there's even I actually have a feelings and needs chart now that I quite often share. This is kept in the library, and I share it with the ladies that I work with, because sometimes you need a prompt. You need to understand what feelings are. You need to understand what needs are, so that you can take action and make decisions. You can't make decisions about what happens in your relationships if you don't know what you need. If you don't know what you need in a relationship, how can you ask for it? If you don't know what you need in a relationship, you're just going to end up doing what the other person wants because you're so used to being needless and wantless. That's not how you show up in a relationship, because the relationship then always becomes, the power dynamic is always with the other person. If you don't know what your needs are, the power dynamic is always going to be with the other person, and that's not healthy. That's when the people pleaser stuff comes in. And do you know what? At the end of the day, if the relationship is always focused on the other person, that is a recipe for resentment. Okay, that is a recipe for resentment. If you're always focusing on the other person in the relationship, that is a recipe for resentment. It just creates more fear as well. It creates more fear and resentment because you don't know who you are. You don't know who you are in relationship. You don't know how to ask for your needs to get met. And if you want to show up in the relationship, you need to start there. And when you understand who you are, when you understand what your needs are, you're going to catastrophize a lot less. Because that part of you that's always catastrophizing is really your inner child. It's really your inner child. Your inner child did not get your actual child did not get their needs met, okay, when you were growing up. So then when you're an adult, there's the inner child, which was that young part of you that didn't get her needs met in childhood. That part of you is still with you. So when you're in an adult relationship, that inner child, that young part of you is still upset because they didn't get their needs met. So that's the work. That's the work. The work is you connecting with your inner child, you having a conversation with that inner black girl, that vulnerable part of you that didn't get her needs met, and find out what she needs. When you've got a relationship with that part of yourself, okay, then there's more likely that you're going to be able to show up in your adult love relationships because your inner child is being taken care of from your inner adult, if that makes sense. So that part of that young part of you that didn't get their needs met, that's miscatastrophe. That's miscatastrophe. Miscatastrophe is your inner child going, oh my God, that person doesn't love me. That person's not going to want me. That person's going to think I'm not good enough. That person is going to leave. That is the young part of you that didn't have their needs met and is still running your relationships. And that's the work. That's the work, is you being able to unpack that and understanding that part of yourself and having compassion for that part of yourself and looking after that part of yourself. Self-parenting. That's really, really important. Okay. So that's number 4, miscatastrophe. Okay. That's miscatastrophe. Number 5. Okay. The 5th part of personality type, okay, that manifests as a result of abandonment wounds is Miss Side Piece. Okay, this is Miss Side Piece. Okay, so this is not to disrespect anybody that's in this situation or shame anybody that's in this situation. It's about you being able to unpack and understand this behavior, and it might not apply to everyone. Okay, but this behavior, okay, this side piece behavior, whether it's a married man or whatever it is, or somebody else who's already in a relationship, you tend to find yourself in relationships with people that are already in relationships, again, because you're afraid of rejection. Okay, maybe you being Miss Side Piece means that you're in more control of the relationship because this person is already in a relationship with somebody else. So you don't have to fully immerse yourself. You don't have to fully immerse yourself in what it means to be in a relationship because you're just only part of it. You're not fully engaged in that relationship. You can pick somebody else. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier on about picking somebody where you can blame them. You can blame them and not take responsibility for your part in that dynamic. Okay, you can always blame the person. If you're Miss Side Piece, you can always blame the other person for what goes on in the relationship because he's already in a relationship with somebody else. He's already in a relationship with somebody else. And what you're also doing is you're setting yourself up for pain. If you're Miss Side Piece, you're setting yourself up for pain. You're setting yourself up with somebody who's not emotionally available, aka childhood abandonment wound again. Can you see where I'm going with this? So it's really, really important It's really, really important for you to unpack this. Where in your life have you, if you relate to Miss Side Piece, where in your life have you been in situations where you've engaged with somebody who's already in a relationship with someone else? Because then, you're still getting some sort of connection. You're allowing yourself to get crumbs. You're allowing yourself to get crumbs in the relationship, but you're never fully in the relationship. And then you get to blame the other person for choices that you've made. Okay, if you relate to Miss Side Piece, it's important for you to think about, okay, well, how is this really serving me? How am I hurting myself? Because this is a form of self-sabotage. How am I hurting myself in this situation? And how does that really relate to what happened to me as a child? Maybe my dad maybe your dad was unavailable. Maybe your dad wasn't there physically or emotionally. So you, in a way, fully being in a relationship with somebody else, or it doesn't matter whether it's a man or a woman, depending on what's going on for you. The cycle is going to continue, and you might not recognize it at the time, because if your dad wasn't there, you don't recognize that you've got avoidant behavioral patterns around in relationships because of that. But the work is actually having that conversation with yourself. The work is bringing the unconscious that I don't have a relationship with my dad, therefore I'm going to choose a partner who's also unavailable. That bringing it into the conscious, that's the work. Okay, so somebody's saying in the chat, the cycle continues and you continue to receive more feedback that you deserve to be abandoned, reinforcing the pain of that wound. 100%. 100%. It's understanding the pattern. In therapy, we call that repetition compulsion. Okay? In therapy, we call that repetition compulsion, where, especially if it's unconscious, you're just repeating the same cycle over and over and over again, because you don't know this, you don't understand, or you haven't yet had the conversation and outed yourself around the behavior, because you don't understand it. So you're just repeating it. When I was doing that, I was the queen of picking men that weren't available. I was the queen of picking men that were addicts. Because I didn't understand at the time that, my dad was, God rest his soul, my dad was, he was physically there, but emotionally he wasn't available. So I kept picking men that were not available. I'd end up in relationships that were abusive. I'd end up in relationships that were abusive. You can't change your adult relationships until you're willing to have the conversations about what happened to you as a child. What did you learn about relationships as a child? What did you learn about being a black person as a child? What did you internalize about being a black person living under the system of racism? What did you learn about relationships, about black people in relationships growing up? Some of the stuff that I internalized was, black love doesn't work. It's just all toxic stuff I learned. It's all toxic stuff that I've learned. And I've had to unpack my own internalized racism. I've had to unpack my own toxic behavior. Okay, that's one of the reasons why I went to therapy. Because I had this young child. Okay, I had this young child, and my thing was, I do not want to raise this child with my unhealthy behavior. Not to victim blame, but I found myself in a cycle of relationships that had the same issues, and the common denominator was me. The common denominator was me. So the reason why I decided to go into recovery, to start going to therapy, is because I was like, I need to unpack this shit. I need to unpack this shit, because I am not raising a child in this environment, and I wanted to be an example for her. I wanted to be an example for her so she understands, who she is. I can't teach my daughter about self-esteem, about her identity, about self-love. I can't teach her none of that unless I have it myself. And that was the issue with me growing up. My mum and my parents tried to teach me something that they didn't have themselves. You can't teach your child what you don't have. I sent an email out to my email list this morning about, kind of like, obviously it's the 1st of September today, and this is the last week of the school holidays, and just talking about how, The school holidays used to be really painful for me because it was just like, oh my God, all of the responsibilities, the juggling as a single parent, the resentment, and just the pain that comes with, having to look. And I realized that, number one, it was triggering for me because it triggered a lot of my own childhood wounds, number one, being, doing the school holidays. And second of all, I had to really now use it as an opportunity to check in with myself. And this is what I've learned about the school holidays. I had to learn how to check in with myself. Well, how was my who was my daughter being now? She's 13 now. Who is she as a human, as a separate human being? Who is she? And do I know her? What are her needs now as a 13-year-old young black girl? What are her needs? As a teenager, worrying about her identity and culture and being a young girl and her body changing and the hormone, who is she? And who am I as a parent? How is our relationship? How am I showing up for her as a parent? And what are my needs as a parent in order for me to show up for her? Okay, these are all things that are really, really important conversations now that I have with myself, and with her, about our relationship, to make sure that I'm showing up as a parent as best I can. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's about communication at the end of the day. Because I don't get it right. I said to her, sometimes I don't know what I'm doing. Even after all the therapy and all the rest of it, sometimes I just feel like I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. But it's the honesty that's important. And it's about making her aware as well that if I don't know what I'm doing, I will find out. If I don't know what I'm doing, I'll get support. I'll go and talk to my therapist. I'll go and talk to my therapist so that I'll read books, I'll listen to podcasts, I'll do whatever I need to do to figure out how I can keep improving the relationship based on what her needs are, based on what my needs are as a parent. Very important. And the whole thing as well around making sure that there's a sort of transition now. You've got 1 week left from the school holidays, and then next week she's back at school. So how am I going to reset my self-care practice now to realign with her being back at school? What does that look like? How has your self-care been impacted? If you're a parent, how has that been impacted? And what do you need to do now to reset your self-care now with children going back to school? If you're interested and you actually want a self-care practice, a reset a practice for you to be able to do that, I have a 5-day reset experience for black women on my website at the moment. So if you click the link in the bio, go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. There's loads of information there about how you can do the 5-day reset and get yourself back on track when your children go back to school. This is whether you've got children or not. Actually, if you've fallen off the wagon, maybe you haven't got kids, but you've fallen off the wagon with your self-care and you want an opportunity to kind of dive back in, the 5-day reset experience is for you as well. You can do that. All right. So yeah, just going back to the Miss Side Piece thing. Just think about that. Think about why you're doing what you're doing, and if you have a what was going on in your childhood that may have contributed to this behavior that's sabotaging you, that's hurting you. Okay, so think about that. So that's it for today. Those are the 5 personality types that can manifest as a result of childhood abandonment. So I'll just quickly run through them again. So the first one is Miss Strong Black Woman. Okay, Miss Strong Black Woman. Number 2, Miss People Pleaser. Number 3, Miss Sabotage. Okay. Number 4, Miss Catastrophe. And number 5, Miss Side Piece. All of these personality types are all rooted in I'm scared of being abandoned. Okay, I'm scared of being seen and I'm scared of being abandoned. So all of these different personality types are adapted. They're adapted their survival behaviors for us to protect ourselves from being hurt. Okay, if that's you and you want more support around anything that I've shared today, Again, you can join us for the book club. It's on Thursday at 8 p.m. London time. All right. So you click the link in the bio, go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. If you've got any other questions or anything that you want to share, that you want to ask about anything that I've shared today, or anything else about how you can work with me or whatever, you can send me a DM, or you can email me info@yardofgreatness.com. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have an amazing day, and I will see you next time. All right, take care. Bye now. Bye bye.